Hey, so welcome everyone. My name is Miriam Sammartino. I am the Executive Director of Catholic Charities Yolo Solano. And we have a very special guest tonight, Miss Mara Sammartino, a licensed clinical social worker. And before we get into the main part of today's program, let's talk a little bit about Catholic Charities and our mental health services. So, for those of you who may not know, Catholic Charities Yola Solano has been serving the community for almost 80 years. We're coming up on our anniversary. We're very excited. And we really have focused on stabilizing and strengthening our community. And we focus on stabilizing because so many different crises come into our lives day to day, year to year. A lot of them are out of our control, some are internal. And so to be able to work effectively, be a thriving member of our community, to give back to our families, we need to have stabilization, whether it be housing, food, work, mental health, wellness. And then the strengthening part is once you've been able to identify and have your basic needs met, how do we work from there, right? And tonight's focus, which is mental health, um, really is focused on the stabilization and the strengthening, right? Because mental health is not a weakness. Mental health is very important. And sometimes it's hard for us to identify that we're going or struggling through something. But it's very important to identify it, to get the help and, find a path to where you are feeling a little better, where you are having the skills and the community and the support needed to get through a lot of life's difficulties. So just to provide a little summary of what we are able to offer, our current mental health wellness programs offer individual and couples therapy, and we do those through interns who are supervised by a licensed clinical supervisor. We also offer a variety of group classes ranging from court order domestic violence intervention classes, and those are done either in person depending on the capacity that we have in our office. We can also do virtual offerings, and those usually go for about 52 weeks, which is a full year. We also offer court mandated parenting classes for those who are required to complete those courses. We also offer anger management. It's not court ordered, but it is a 6 week long course where we are able to discuss anger management, coping skills, triggers, things like that. And then also our newest addition to our mental health services um, is the Triple P Positive Parenting Program. And this is in partnership with First Five Solano. It is a free service. So for any of you out there who are needing or wanting to know more information about Triple P or a positive parenting program, go ahead and check out our website at ccyoso.org. But tonight's event, we will be focusing on our another very new program that Ms. Sammartino is leading for us. This is called, in Spanish, called Cultivando Esperanza, so cultivating hope. And this is sponsored by Kaiser Permanente. And the goal is to provide mental health services to undocumented persons in our community, in addition to providing financial support. One of the things that we saw, we're anticipating and are continuing to see during this COVID-19 pandemic is that the priority of basic needs, right, meaning food, shelter, medical services, sometimes that becomes so much that we forget the mental health piece that is required to be able to, like I said, thrive and emerge out of this pandemic. And so in partnership with Mara and the practice group, we are able to offer group classes. So it's a 4 week long course. Mm-hmm. And I'll let Mara explain a little bit more, but we're very excited and we're very thankful to have you, lend your expertise and really guide our families through this very difficult time. So Mara, tell us a little bit about yourself and your practice here in Solano County.
Well, thank you, Miriam, for inviting me and having me. And so my name is Mara Sammartino, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker. And I have been in the field now for about 15 years. I am bilingual and bicultural, so my main focus is with the Latino community because that's where my heart is. And so I've worked the whole lifespan from young adults to the elderly. And so my focus mainly in my office is with adults, Spanish speaking adults, parents, because I recognize that that's kind of where we have some gaps missing in our system. So that's where I'm at now. And I love being able to provide this group. We're in our third series of 4 weeks. And it's been amazing to have such a great response with all the participants. And even though it's only 4 short weeks, a lot of the feedback has been, I never even thought about this. It's nice to have an hour to myself sometimes. And so, yeah, it's been definitely very rewarding.
Awesome. And I guess we should explain, right? We do share a last name, and we are not related by blood. For those who may be curious, Mara and I attended UC Davis together, and that's how we met. We were on the same floor in the residence. So that has been a lifelong journey for us, huh?
20 years. Yeah.
It's been fun. We've learned, and I think I mean, many of the things that we share, but one of the things that we do share is our passion for our local community and
Mhm.
to identify the gaps, like you said, in services, in opportunities that sometimes we forget, those who are living or suffering in silence, living in the margins, may not know where to go, who to go to. And the Latino community tends to work very much on a network base,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about your experience.
Yes, yeah. So yes, although we share the same last name, we share a lot of commonalities in our passion to help people, and I think that's how we have been able to support the families, right? Like, I joke that you get the best of both worlds with an attorney and a social worker in terms of networking. But it's not just what we do professionally. I think it's also how we've connected with our community. We are in our community. We definitely understand the needs of our community, not only through our personal struggles, but how we help other families. And I think that's the beauty of our community is that when we can help one family, they become an example for others, and then they can kind of guide them to the services. What I try to tell people is that like there's only one of maybe 10 in the whole county that speaks Spanish therapists. So if you can help a family, before they go into crisis, you're a mental health first responder as well, and so I really advocate for education because that is one of the things that kind of lessens the gap, right? Is the more resources and education we can give people, the more that they can advocate for themselves and don't have to rely on quote unquote the expert, right? Again, we're so far and few in between. You said kind of living in silence. People are really scared sometimes to even just ask the question of like, where do I get help? How do I get help? Who do I go to?
Mhm. Yeah, and I'm really interested to know what your take has been on, prior to COVID, there was a lot of outreach on destigmatizing mental health, and then we're hit with this pandemic. It kind of throws all of our lives into a whole different situation we weren't expecting. Do you see that the demystifying mental health? How has that impacted COVID-19 response in terms of mental health? Is it still a barrier? The stigma of talk mental health.
In a way, right? Like we haven't raised mental health a big event that we kind of, common avenues of outreach to do the, education and destigmatizing mental health have been limited. And so it is a lot of word of mouth. And I think having programs like Cultivando Esperanza or a trusted agency like Catholic Charities has allowed to maybe navigate that outreach a little bit better because A, they're trusted, B, people have firsthand experience, and then C, they get services, right? So it not only through Catholic Charities, but through all of our other networking partners, right? And so I think that's how we've had to navigate destigmatizing, right?
Mhm.
Within the 4 weeks, we talk about that. That's one of the first topics we talk about is just what led you to come to the group and what have been some barriers in getting mental health services. Um, Stigma is one, but it's also access and providers.
Mhm. And if you can tell us a little bit more, why is access providers a barrier?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the trillion-dollar question. I think it's partly because, at least for the Latino community, right? Because that's where I have my knowledge base. There's not a lot of us. Percentage-wise, social workers, there's only about 5% that identify as Latino, and even out of that, maybe not bilingual or bicultural, right? And so, our community is about networking. So when they find someone that they like, they're going to spread the word. And so it has to do with that balancing, right? Of like, how much can I take on as a provider, but then how can I educate future, providers?
Right.
So a big thing about destigmatizing that going into the mental health field is just as, powerful as becoming a doctor, becoming an engineer, or things like that.
Right.
So that's the biggest thing is recruitment.
And kind of going back to this program, Cultivando Esperanza, if you can share a little bit, right, without obviously violating any of our clients' confidentiality, but has there been anything that maybe shocked you in our participants' responses that maybe you weren't expecting?
I think one of the things that I've been noticing, and again, we're in our third group, is I think the resiliency. And I think it's not that it's shocking. I think it's that it's more present. And what I mean by that is that people are recognizing their own resiliency more, right? With
Mm,
this, because I think before it would have, and this is cultural too, right? Like el que dirán, right? And
mhm,
what will other people say? And so what I'm noticing is that there's a lot of empowerment. I think that they're gaining not only through the group, but this experience of COVID of having to navigate something that everyone else is experiencing, right? Because oftentimes, because they're so marginalized, that's they are experiencing something that no one else can experience. And
mhm,
so I think not to say it but it's kind of given an even playing field. And so for them to understand, well, my neighbor's struggling just as much as I am, but maybe I have a network, and so I was able to navigate it. And so
mhm,
that resiliency and hope really was astounding, because I think we kind of think of like deficits when we're in COVID mind, right? Like,
mhm.
and so it's been beautiful to have them share amongst themselves just what are the resources. How do I navigate this and how do I navigate that? And so it's been beautiful, because I think we forget sometimes just how resilient we are.
Yeah, resiliency and hope. I think that's a better motto, right, for COVID-19 pandemic. So can you tell us a little bit about, what are the topics that are discussed during this 4-week program?
Yeah, definitely. So the first session for all of the groups is basically just understanding basic mental health. I think within our community, whether it's Latino or in general, we don't really know what mental health is, or what is a diagnosis, or what
Mhm,
constitutes depression. And so we really do the education piece. Again, that's kind of one of my pillars as a professional, is how can I educate you better on navigating your symptoms. So we talk about that. Then we move on into kind of self-care. How to Now that we've understood that we have depression, or we may be experiencing this, what are some things that limit you in self-care? And then sometimes we do talk about trauma. I really do let the participants kind of guide the program, because it is their group. But those are kind of the basics, understanding mental health, understanding self-care, understanding trauma, and then obviously resources. How do we get people connected with resources, whether it's through Catholic Charities, whether it's navigating county mental health, and calling the access line, and other resources, housing, things like that. So
right.
it is all encompassing in 4 weeks.
Wow, that's a lot to cover in 4 weeks. But I think that's part of the understanding, right? That it's community based. It's you can't do it alone. I
Right.
think a lot of us have learned during this pandemic that it's we need each other more than ever, um, and it doesn't have to be at a like you were saying at a professional level, right? Sometimes it could be something simple. It could be listening to each other, saying, "Hey, I really heard or I read this cool article, or I heard this on a podcast, or I saw this video," and just sharing it, right? Because you never know where that other person is, or what message they need to hear that day. Um, so let's open it up a little bit more in general. Um, Again, right? COVID-19 is the topic. We're seeing some emerging some light, right? Some hope coming through this financial crisis, this mental health crisis, or the public health crisis. But there's mental health, right? And mental health has always been bubbling underneath the surface of everything else. And it seems that it always gets pushed to maybe the third line in the priorities because you need to get fed, you need to get health. But then
Mhm.
there's mental health. So, as you know, in your field, what do you think are some of the effects or symptoms that our community may be showing because of this underlying mental health that we haven't quite addressed yet?
Yeah, good question, because I think we have been, kind of in this mode of just push, 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 and then COVID hit, right? And so
Mhm.
it's kind of been the biggest stoplight for all of us. And so, some of the things I've been seeing is definitely fatigue. You're right, there's light at the end of the tunnel, but, the fatigue has been there since before COVID. And so, how do you navigate that fatigue? How do you navigate working from home? For some of us, it's been the first time we've been working from home. Some of us haven't stopped working. And so, how do we navigate virtual and distance learning? And so, I think a lot of it is creating awareness too that it's okay to have these symptoms. It's okay that you can feel depressed and angry and irritable and sad and happy and hopeful all at the same time, that it's not one or the other. And I also think it's important to recognize that, if anything, COVID has also seen or shown that mental health is one of the things that we should be talking about and addressing more on a day-to-day basis and not
Right.
waiting for a crisis.
Right.
Um, the more we can be proactive of our mental health. So putting in place self-care, whatever that looks like. I was talking to the group and they were like, I love to go to nature. I love to be in the water, things that, sometimes we don't even consider self-care. How do we be more proactive in implementing those things? Um, and then also, how do we implement structure and how do we say no? How do we say, I'm not okay right now. I need some space. Um, so I think, yes, you're right. Mental health has been, flying under the radar. And so COVID has definitely brought up some of those symptoms. And I always encourage people to go to their primary care doctor if they can. Start there, because sometimes it could be something that isn't mental health related and it's physical related that is impacting your mental health. And maybe if you get your physical health worked out and straightened out, then your mental health will also benefit, and vice versa.
Right.
The treatment doesn't stop because it's from the neck up or the neck down. We're all one instrument here.
No, you're absolutely right, and that's I think we, especially for those who are parents, it's so much easier to ignore what's going on in within you because you have a child or multiple children or other people that you're caring for, and so it's easier to focus on others than to focus inward. 'Cause that's the hardest part, I think. Can you share maybe some just easy self-care tips? Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So, and this one is bilingual. So UCLA, out of Los Angeles, has a mindfulness institute, and so they have free meditation online. So UCLA has it in Spanish and in English. And meditation's not for everyone. So if that's something you're interested in, that's one. There's apps. If you're technologically, interested, there's Calm, which, if you have Kaiser, they gave it for free for a year, if you're a Kaiser member. But I think finding what's important to you is self-care, right?
Mhm.
Because again, just because, you like your nails done doesn't mean I'm going to like my nails done. So
Right.
vice versa. So I think, finding things that are important to you. Someone in one of our groups said makeup, that they love to do their makeup, and just how to be dedicated to that, and so making sure that you give yourself time. And with that time comes boundaries. And so, one of the things, I say is that, like, if I'm going to go to Starbucks, I'm going by myself. I'm not taking no kids. I'm not taking a husband. It's my time, right? That's a boundary. And that's also self-care,
Right.
which is hard in our Latino families to be like, pero no, right? Like, well, no is okay. It doesn't mean that you don't love them or that you don't want to spend time with them. You got to put time into yourself. So meditation,
Yeah.
I think, reading, listening to music, being in nature. We're fortunate enough to have Lagoon Valley open. We have all these beautiful hikes here, at least in Solano County, and we're not far from the Bay, or Sacramento if you like water. So those things, but also I think ultimately too is community. You know.
Community. Absolutely. I think it's hard for us to diagnose or to at least understand what it's like to feel burnout,
Mm,
and fatigue, right? And then
mhm.
one of the things I've been thinking about is kind of like when, like if you're sick or you get a cold, then the cold goes away and you kind of little, just one extra day to kind of get right back into where you were before you got the cold, right? And
Yeah,
I think that it's kind of the same thing with fatigue and burnout and a lot of these mental health symptoms and issues is that there has to be kind of like a rebalancing time, and that requires patience patience with yourself, but then letting your community know that you need some time as well. Like you can't just bounce back right to where
right.
you were before.
Yeah.
Um, have you seen that discussion come up? Another cultivando esperanza or another.
Yeah, I don't know if you were in my group, but that's what we talked about today. We talked about actually
I
stress
wasn't.
and we talked about stress and burnout and the difference between what is stress and what is burnout. And so, one of the things that I explained is that stress can be a good thing, right? Like, you and I went to college together. We know, like, midterms, we'd be pulling all-nighters, and we'd be like, we're never doing this again. And then, we pull off that A or something, right? So that type of stress
Absolutely.
is not that it's good, but it's motivating. It's telling you you got to get something accomplished, right? And so, so stress can be good in that sense. Stress can be bad when it impacts our day to day, right? When we're dreading going to work or we're dreading getting out of bed. And so we talked about how stress then becomes burnout, because burnout is the disconnect, the emotional disconnect of these symptoms, meaning you just don't care. Like you're blah, you have apathy, and so that's the dangerous part, right? But you know, burnout, a lot of us do experience burnout and we just push through it and we become so apathetic even to ourselves, right? And so yeah, we've talked about that because in COVID, unfortunately, some of our families are essential workers. They've been working in the fields, they've been working, fast food restaurants, and so they've been pushing and pushing and pushing. And so being mindful that, that connection, like you said, that bounce back takes longer when you're in burnout for longer, when you're in stress for longer. Um, all of us have heard the fight, flight, or freeze, right?
Mhm.
But then, all of that can be draining, and so being able to have that space and community and have support. And for some of our families, it's hard to find that support. But I think again, knowing that we have agencies like Catholic Charities or other partners is important to kind of get that load off of even basic needs. I think that's been the biggest thing too, is just how do I get through today? So yeah, we have talked about it, and it's real out there.
Yeah, yeah. And so for any, for everyone who's watching, whether live or in a recording, if you are feeling if you're connecting with any of these topics, please reach out to your primary care physician, to your community, to your network. Solano County does have behavioral health services. They have an access line, and we'll be sharing that on our Facebook page. We have private practitioners such as Mara and others, if you are able to as well. But the thing is, get connected, talk
Mhm.
to somebody, share with what's share what's going on, what you're feeling. Don't be ashamed. There's many of us feeling the same way. And it's not about what's going to happen to others or what are they going to say. It's really your own health. And as you said, Mara, it's one instrument. So if one piece isn't um, working at its ultimate capacity, it's not going to work in the end. Um, we've seen a lot of this. You mentioned this fight, flight, and freeze, and a lot of time people may not understand that when you're in stress, when you are constantly worried, when there's anxiety, right? You're at this high stress level, and it becomes normalized in your body, and it's not good.
Right. Yeah, no, I kind of give the example of an alarm clock. Um, so imagine stress just being an alarm clock that you can't shut off.
Mm.
And that's trauma too, right? Stress, trauma. It's you can't hit snooze, you can't, it just is there. And as much as you want to turn it off, your your response has been conditioned to do those things, right? To either flight, meaning you withdraw, you get depressed, maybe you're not engaging as much, or you're fighting, which is you're irritable, you're angry, you're feeling this desperation, or you freeze. And in some instances, that's also withdrawing, or emotionally just shutting down. And so it is important to reach out, because long term, exposure to this alarm clock, eventually you're going to give out. And we've all been there. Some of us may have never been to a therapist, but we've had these experiences, and we go to the doctor, and the doctor might give you something for short-term relief, and you get that short-term relief. It's also understanding that it is something that everyone can do, not just because you have a diagnosis or don't have a diagnosis. It's about being proactive, of being the best that you can be in that moment. So yeah, definitely. Just I like what you said about reaching out, because it is important. If it's not a professional, reach out to someone you trust. I know that's hard too. We can be
Vulnerable.
scary. Yeah, we can be scary. A therapist can be scary. It's okay.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's putting yourself in the most vulnerable, open that I think we've all been in, right? Like we're not asked to do that on a day to day. We're not trained. It's not part of our childhood for many of us. And to say that I need help is probably one of the hardest things.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the other stigmas or myths out there is, well, once I go to a therapist, and I'll be fine,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
I'm never gonna have to go again because I already went.
Yeah, no. I mean, I think that's for most, even myself, before going into this field, it was like, oh, it's okay. It's like an annual checkup. It's like, which it should be. Your mental health should be an annual checkup. But, here's the thing too, therapy is based on your situation, and if it's just, something that you need to discuss with someone that isn't in your family, therapists can do that. We're trained to address a lot of things. It's not just long term. It's not what people think of, like sitting on the couch laid back and talking about like how you were born. For some it might be, but for the most part, most of us are talking about like, oh, I have this going on, and I want to get a solution, right? The other thing to consider is that, as therapists too, we have a different perspective. We're outsiders, so sometimes you may have the solution. You just need to talk it out to someone who can say, oh, have you thought about this way? And for the most part, at least the way I practice is what I called solution focused. So I'm very much like, what is the goal for you, right? What would therapy help you with? Let's work towards that goal, right? Again, there's different types of therapists. And again, your problems are going to evolve. And hopefully what you get out of therapy is coping skills, things that you can implement on a day-to-day basis, or when you feel like you're not at your 100%, so you don't get into crisis. That's what all of us are trying to avoid, is crisis, right? That breakdown, that meltdown.
Yeah.
We can have them when we're 2 or 3, but it's, socially acceptable is not at 40, even though we should be able to. I'm not saying don't have them. I'm just saying we don't respond as well anymore.
Right. Right. Kind of curious if we talk about what are the gaps in services that maybe you see that you've heard that we should be looking to addressing?
Oh, how much time? No, I'm just kidding. No, no. I think I joke, but I think it is, at least for me, that's been my lifelong passion in my careers to address gaps, and what I've been doing. So I think one of the biggest gaps is just awareness. I think access and knowing, you know, that you can get mental health in a variety of different ways. It's not just a therapist.
Mm,
At least that's how I view it, right? I think we have to have education. I think the biggest gap, at least for Latinos, is recruitment. We don't have a lot of Latinos, or people who identify as Latino. Um, you know, we know that we can provide therapy, but if someone doesn't look like us or speak like us, there's a lot of things lost in translation. And that's not just for the Latino community, that's for any community, non-English speaking community. I think we have to be mindful, that there are certain things that just people are more comfortable sharing in their native tongue. So that's one. I also think understanding how to navigate the system. It's scary. I mean, even those of us that are, highly educated also get frustrated. Press one for this, press two for that. So imagine if we don't have basic knowledge of how the system works. So having more awareness of how to navigate the system, I think, is important. And I also think, kind of going back to your point about, like, I only have to go once, right? Um, Creating that dialogue of, how is your mental health? How can you be in tune with your mental health so it doesn't get to a crisis?
right,
And then you can access what you need, right? Because not everyone doesn't need to go to therapy. You don't have to have a diagnosis to go to therapy. I think that's another one of those myths, right? Like,
right.
oh, I have to have depression. No, you can simply be having a hard time, you know, picking something out in your life that you need help with, and therapy can assist you with that.
Yeah.
And so gaps, access, education, recruitment, and then there's a million other things that fall underneath those, but I think those
Right.
three probably.
And one of the things that I'm hearing is, we put so much responsibility on the person needing or seeking services, right? We ask them to seek out, we ask them to find the resource, but a lot of it falls on service providers as well, right? Whether it be nonprofit, community clinics, county, statewide. We have a responsibility to understand what it's like to be a community member, to have maybe economic differences, cultural, linguistic, technological differences. That
Mhm,
sometimes when we say, well, just simply log in, it's not simple. If you've never had to do it, if
mhm.
you've never even owned a computer, and so for service providers as well, I think we need to check in with mental health providers to see, and to our clients, really understand what are we doing that's making it harder than what it needs to be, but then coming from it as if we're here to help, how do we do it the best way? And kind of going back to our Cultivando Esperanza in partnership with Kaiser, that was part of the discussion, right? What's
Mhm.
going on, seeing the gap, what has been the feedback of our community, how do we start, being creative and innovative in reaching those who may not know these traditional avenues that we think about as service providers that are easy to get into.
Right, right. I mean, it kind of brings back to, probably one of our Chicano studies classes that we took, of like teatro campesino, right? Where, they went to the campos and provided, you know, information in a way that the campesinos understood, right? Which was through theater, which was through art, which was not up level, oh, you're diagnosed with X, Y, and Z, but just, simple language. And I think that's part of the service providers, right? I have experience with working with government agencies and nonprofits, and sometimes it's having that knowledge base of, like, well, what does this mean even for us as service providers? And if we don't understand it, how are consumers or participants going to understand? So yeah, I think we should be very mindful as service providers of the expectations we put on to our community members, because at the end of the day, of our abilities, they will also serve their community to the best of their abilities. And it's a win-win for both of us, right? So yeah, definitely that is part of it too, is also being, like you said, reaching out to people that are the experts too, not assuming that we can hold it all on our own.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, kind of going back to our mission and what we Catholic Charities has done over 80 years. It's if we are focused on stabilizing and strengthening our community, well, it has to come from the community, right? Um, I think there's been so many examples in academia where this program is greatly designed, it has all the new bells and whistles, but then when you put it in the actual
Hmm.
practical setting of the community, it doesn't work because it missed completely understanding what the dynamics were.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's, one of the greatest failures if we invest so much time in creating something without even getting the input of those who we intend to help.
Yeah, yeah. Community participation is important, because ultimately, this is my tagline. I'm not with you 24/7, nor do I want to be with you 24/7. So let's work on the tools that will get rid of me. Because essentially that's the goal, right? You don't want to have a therapist for 20 years, the same therapist for 20 years. And so, some people will laugh at that, but at the same time, that is the goal. We want you to be better, right? We want you to have the voice that you can go back to, and go back to, let's say to Catholic Charities and be like, this was amazing, or this didn't work.
Right.
So I think accountability and transparency are also things that service providers need to work on,
Right.
in order, like you said, to have something that's successful, and to be trusting, of the community, that they know what they need.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's interesting point as we're gonna wrap up here soon. The community knows what it needs, right? And we know what we need. Sometimes it's identifying and uh, expanding that discussion, right, within ourselves, with somebody else, with the community. Um, so yeah, great insight. It's a good reminder for today. So let's see here. I'm going to open up the chat to check in if we have any questions. Um, oh, okay. So we do have a question. Let's see here. Let me close this out. So let's kind of go back to access, right? If people want to access this program or any, let's focus first on mental health. Um, if anybody wants to know a little bit more of your services, where would they go, Mara?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So you can, so I am one of three uh, owners of the practice counseling services here in Solano County. And so you can visit us on our website at the practice, C as in cat, S as in Sam.com. And so again, because of COVID, we're virtual. So the beauty of, I guess, COVID that's allowed us is that we can see anyone in California right now. Before it was just Solano County. But now most medical insurances have opened up for virtual. So you can find me there, or on Facebook, the Practice Counseling Services. If you don't have, we take private insurance or cash, but if you have, say, like Medi-Cal, or like in Solano County Partnership or in Yolo County Partnership, you can always call Partnership or the county mental health line. So here in Solano, you can call them, and then they can refer you based on your insurance too, whether it's through Partnership or through Medi-Cal, to service providers.
That's great. And then for those who are interested in services through Catholic Charities, the best way to find out about our programs and sign up for more information is through our website, which is www.ccyoso.org. So you should spell out Catholic Charities Yolo Solano. On our Facebook page, we'll be posting a lot more information about services that are available. Cultivando Esperanza, I think we're pretty much booked,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
because we did partner, and we'll mention our partner in this as well as Migrant Ed.
Yes.
Migrant Ed has been wonderful in connecting to us to their participants, those who are working in the fields, who maybe not live close to the center of the county, but our goal has always been to connect to those who are isolated, marginalized, maybe not without knowledge of all these other services. But our website, you'll find not only mental health, but immigration legal services, food, housing, excuse me. So I know the biggest announcement that we have, right, is the new emergency rental assistance program that will be opening up soon here. But it's not just about rental assistance, right? Get your basic needs, get your mental health needs, right? Get um, so let's see, any other uh, trends that you've seen maybe in COVID response or just from community members in terms of needing mental health services?
Yeah, I think kind of going back to what I said about, access. So COVID has shown us that we can provide effective mental health through virtual, platforms. And I think that's also something to consider, right? Um, that what traditional therapy looks like
Mm,
isn't going to work for everyone. And I think that's also something as service providers we've been trying to navigate. Um, and again, every therapist is different, right? Everyone, has their likes and dislikes. I, for one, have been very grateful to have this platform because I can see people that are all the way down in San Diego or even as far north, as Fort Bragg. And so it's allowed the access to be, granted a little bit more. And so I would hope community members, those that are, experiencing positive interactions through the virtual platforms, continue to ask for that. Because that's the other thing. If people don't speak up, I think that's something that we've seen with COVID. If we don't speak up, we're not going to get our needs met, and so
yeah,
yes, we work with the most marginalized, and so having them understand that they can speak up and that they have to speak up in order for us to kind of shift the needle from just service provider oriented to more community participation and engagement, right? So that's definitely the trend that I'm seeing. I think is just people feeling more empowered. And again, we can't empower people; they have to feel empowered. And so I think that's another thing too.
right. No, that's great. Um, and we forget that, that we can empower ourselves. We have to be reminded of that dignity, of that inherent power that we have, that, but we also need help along the way. Sometimes we forget, and so we need a little reminder from whoever it comes from. So we are going to start wrapping it up here. Thank you so much, Mara. I really
Of course.
appreciate it. So just to wrap it up again, you know, Catholic Charities, Yolo Solano has been serving the community for over almost 80 years. Like I shared earlier, we are coming up on our anniversary, very excited. Um, but we can't, one of the things that we've done in Catholic Charities is our ability to adapt. Just like our community is asked to be resilient and to adapt to everything that comes, our way, Catholic Charities also does the same thing because we have to, because we are looking to, again, strengthen and stabilize. And we do that by changing our services and responding to the greatest need in our community. And although, we do receive grants and a lot of support, sometimes it doesn't is not enough. Sometimes it doesn't meet the need identified in the community by the community. And so your support is greatly needed to continue to be able to adapt, to be innovative, and provide these services that are creative enough to be linguistically, culturally competent and appropriate for our community so that all of us are included as we thrive and emerge and come out of this pandemic. So if you are able to support us, we are grateful if you can. You can do so on our website. Again, it's on our Facebook page. Also, if you'd like to have more information of upcoming services that are coming through Catholic Charities, both in Solano and Yolo County, we have our newsletter that you can sign up online. It's free. We send it out once a month, and you get the latest updates, especially for any new programs that are coming. So let's see. It looks like we do have one question. Let's see if Jimmy, do you want to share your question?
Yes,
Go for it, Jimmy.
thank you. Mara, I just wanted to say how grateful I am, we are, that you joined us tonight and your insights. And certainly you've been a real treasure over the past year or two that you've been here. And I know some of us have talked to you and tried to get your advice about certain things as we've come from infancy and growing. So I just wanted to thank you for that. One of the points here, I think, in terms of as we recognize the Catholic Charities, we recognize the gifts that we've been given. I think one of them is the interest, certainly, that Kaiser's shown in the whole mental health side. I think we forget, we recognize sometimes how the so-called hard, services like physical health and, all of the sicknesses that can come with physical health, what impact those have. But we don't recognize sometimes the impacts on physical health that poor mental health can have. And so there's a symbiotic and a mutuality there that I think shows like this can really help kind of highlight, because I think they both have a dramatic effect on each other. One is not just, touchy-feely, and the other is like real. They're both, I think, have a very real impact on our lives and those of our family and community. So thank you for touching on that, Miriam, you too. So I appreciate that very much.
You're very welcome. I always remind people we're like cars. We need a tune-up every once in a while. It's not, And so, yeah, definitely being mindful of how our mind and body and our soul and our spirit work together. So, and again, you don't have to go to a therapist to find needs like that, or get your needs met. Sometimes it is going to church or to a yoga studio or to be out in nature. Whatever fills your cup will also help fill the rest of your mind and body.
Wow. So as we wrap up, again, thank you, Mara, so much. It's always wonderful to talk about what's going on in your world, right? Because that is it's kind of like the thermometer, right, of where our community is standing. Once we're able to meet all these other basic needs, well, there's still some more needs to be met, and so thank you again, and thank you everybody for joining us again. Please share this with your friends and family, your network, because you never know who is suffering in silence, who might need a little bit of encouragement or just some education and awareness of where to go to if they need some help or have some questions. So again, thank you everyone, and good night.
Good night.
Thank you.